Hey guys, welcome back to the Alden Chodash boxing show. We had a big week of fights. We had a predicted fight of the year that might have lived up to the expectation. I think it did. And one of the best pound for pound fighters in the sport, all featured on HBO Boxing After Dark, and an overall great weekend of fights. Well, first we're going to analyze those two fights. First, starting with the undercard, which probably should have been the main event based on the hype. Rios versus Alvarado. It really lived up to the hype. Both guys really went at it. The only thing that might have hindered it from living up to a Gaddy Ward status or Castillo Corrales status was that for me it was just inevitable to see the slow deterioration of Mike Alvarado. Yes, he was winning rounds. Yes, he was landing some huge shots on Brandon Rios. But a guy like Rios is used to that. He can really walk through mostly anything. I haven't seen him hurt once in his career so far. And I mean, he's fighting bigger fighters, but I mean, you'd think that that could lead to those shots having a bigger impact on him. But then again, you have to consider that maybe it'll make him even sturdier, like it did to Miguel Cotto when he moved up to 147 pounds. He's not killing himself to make weight anymore, Brandon Rios and Miguel Cotto, and maybe they can take the punches better. That probably was the case because Mike Alvarado, he's a good puncher. He's bigger. He was landing as hard of shots as you can land on a fighter. And Brandon Rios was walking right through them, landing harder shots on Alvarado, and he broke him down. And he really scored a very good knockout against a very good fighter in the junior welterweight division. So what's next? I'd like to see either of them fight Lucas Matisse. Based on the way they performed against each other, you can tell, and in their prior fights, that they're two guys that like to scrap. They like to, Alvarado doesn't like to take as many punches, but Brandon Rios is, especially willing to go through anything to make his statement, and he's a huge puncher himself. And really, more or less, that's what Lucas Matisse is. Maybe he's a little more tentative in there, but he's also a big puncher, can take big shots, and really likes to get inside and rough it up. Brandon Rios, or especially Brandon Rios, against Lucas Matisse would be the best fight you could make, one of the best fights you can make in boxing in terms of pure entertainment. Um, but certainly the most exciting fight you can make in the junior welterweight division. Of course, the winner would get a shot at Danny Garcia, which is also a very good fight. Junior welterweights once again resurfacing for the first time since about 2005 when the division was really on fire with Floyd Mayweather, Arturo Gatti, Kostya Tszyu, Ricky Hatton. This division is smoking hot again, and thanks to fighters like Brandon Rios, Lucas Matisse, just saw Mike Alvarado, and Danny Garcia. I mean, if they don't decide to move up in weight, it's going to continue this way. And there's plenty of fights they can make with each other before they might have to move up in weight for marketability purposes. But the main event was Nonito Donaire dominating Toshiaki Nishioka, stopping him in 9 rounds, one big right hand. But what kind of disappointed me in this fight, especially in the first 5 rounds, is that you got a guy, Nishioka, who really doesn't have much of a name in the United States. If you look at Ring Magazine, he's recognized as the top contender, maybe even the champion of the junior featherweight division at the time. And people didn't know much about him, but they just assumed that he had a statement to make. He went over there and he didn't throw any punches for the first 5 rounds, and he looked like he was just in awe of Nonito Donaire's stardom and pound for pound status, that he wasn't going to let him become another victim of a monstrous left hook like Fernando Montiel was and Victor Achinyan both were. He chose to take a safe route, and it took Nonito Donaire to get in that sneaky left uppercut that put him down in the 6th round to really get him out of his shell. But from that point on, it really seemed like Nishioka did get a little more aggressive, did try to press the fight, did kind of realize he was in a fight. But, of course, it made him more vulnerable to the counterpunches of Donaire, which ultimately ended the fight. My opinion, this was a much better performance by Donaire than I saw against Jeffrey Matabula back in July. Much better performance because he didn't look one-dimensional. Maybe it was the height and the reach of Matabula that was making Donaire look like a plotting, almost a heavyweight in there. He looked like a guy that had a big punch, didn't want to use anything but his plotting approach to try to get in range to land the big punches, didn't really set things up with the jab, and he almost knocked him out. He did enough to win the fight. Some people thought it was closer than the scorecards indicated, but he didn't look like a complete fighter in that fight. He really didn't. And that's why I was very impressed that he was able to string his punches together despite kind of a defensive wall he was facing against Nishioka to eventually penetrate Nishioka's defense and get him out of there in the ninth round. A very impressive victory on paper and a very impressive victory to watch. He's definitely at least the second best in the junior featherweight division in terms of what he's done. He's beaten everyone but Abner Mares, and Abner Mares and him is eventually going to happen. It's going to be one of the bigger fights, possibly one of the biggest fights in the lower weight divisions, but of course Mares has to get by a great challenge when he faces Anselmo Moreno, who's moving up from bantamweight. Moreno is very awkward. What he does well, or what he does very well. Despite the awkwardness of his style, he's rangy, he's lanky. He really strings them together well, and he's also a southpaw. It's very likely that he beats Abner Mares. Mares has faced very good fighters, but he's still young. He's still young and budding, and Moreno can beat him. It's really a toss-up fight, and obviously whoever wins that fight will face Nonito Donaire to unify the junior featherweight division and create almost a star in that division as Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera were back in 2000. Really, the junior welterweight and junior featherweight division are, kind of throwbacks to what they were back in the early 2000s in terms of what they are right now. They're really impressive divisions, and a true kingpin will emerge, inevitably. So, upcoming fights. October 20th, so this Saturday, we have Showtime putting on a triple header, possibly even a quadruple header. Randall Bailey versus Devin Alexander. The fight's on BoxRec. I assume it's going on. There's been plenty of dispute about whether the fight would take place or not. The fight was supposed to take place more than a month ago, but of course it was canceled on the behalf of Randall Bailey due to an injury. I mean, the guy's getting a little older. You got to suspect that maybe not everything's going to be running as smoothly in the training camp as it was in the past. But I don't give him much of a shot against Devin Alexander. Of course, a puncher's chance, as he always has, and he's proved against Mike Jones. But, I mean, Mike Jones even proved, Randall Bailey's just a little too old to compete and keep up with these young guys unless he lands the big punch. So you can't always assume he's going to land the big punch, especially with a defensive specialist like Devin Alexander, who's much more sound than Mike Jones. I think Devin Alexander will win that fight unless he gets caught with something big. Danny Garcia versus Eric Morales 2. I don't know why we're watching this fight again. It really doesn't look like the farewell of Morales when they fought back in March. Morales had some moments. I mean, he's experienced enough to show Garcia a few tricks that he hasn't seen, gotten a few punches, but he was beaten about 9 out of 12 rounds at least against Danny Garcia, and I have no reason to suspect that there's going to be any difference, especially after Garcia is now the unified junior welterweight champion. He's got a little more confidence under his belt after that stunning knockout of Amir Khan. It possibly just is a tune-up for a fight with Matisse or Brandon Rios in the future. Another fight on that card, Paul Malignaggi is now a welterweight champion, surprisingly, and he's fighting Pablo Cano, who was stopped by Eric Morales last year. It's a good opportunity to see Malignaggi. I haven't seen him since he was beaten soundly by Ricky Hatton. I want to see how much he's improved. I mean, he has the world title. I don't know how he got it, but he has it. So I guess he's switched some things up because for a while it really didn't look like his career was going to persist on the top level. He fought Juan Diaz a couple times. Neither fight really was that entertaining to me. And it seemed like the fact that he was such a light puncher really turned a lot of fighters off, or a lot of fans off, because of his very, very low knockout ratio. Also on that card, we have Peter Quillen against Hassan Najikum, both undefeated, both fighting for the WBO middleweight title. Good opportunity to see Peter Quillen. Never really saw Najikum before. And Peter Quillen is quickly emerging as a potential challenger to Sergio Martinez or Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. I'd probably like to see him fight Chavez Jr. first to really propel himself into that spot to fight Martinez because, I mean, let's face it, as we said in earlier shows, Martinez is one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, and Peter Quillen, besides the fight from Winky Wright, who was aging at the time, he doesn't really have much experience at that level. It would be kind of foolish for them to throw him in against someone like Martinez so quickly. I think if he wins this fight, he's more than entitled to a fight against Chavez Jr. That's if Chavez Jr. doesn't immediately go against Martinez, which very likely might happen. Okay, so that's the immediate future in boxing and the immediate past. Pretty much a very good state of boxing at the moment after a fight actually lived up to an insane hype. I mean, people are saying that Alvarado versus Rios was going to be one of the greatest fights of all time. Almost, I mean, that's clearly exaggerated, but it was a very good fight. It was an excellent fight, probably the fight of the year. And these are the kind of matchups that boxing needs, and these are the type of performances that fighters need to give fans. Thank you for watching, and I'll be here next week.